Welcome back to our Advanced User Interface Technologies lecture series. In today's lecture, we are going to discuss form validation in React applications, one of the most important concepts in front-end web development. In our previous classes, we learned how to create forms using both controlled forms and uncontrolled forms. Now imagine that a user enters the following details: an invalid email address, a phone number containing only 5 digits, a password with only 3 characters, a blank name field. Should the application simply accept all this information? Of course not. And an application must verify whether the information entered by the user is correct before saving it. This verification process is called form validation. Without validation, applications become unreliable, databases become inconsistent, and users experience unnecessary errors. By the end of today's lecture, you will understand how React validates user input, displays meaningful error messages, and improves the overall user experience. So let's begin. Before we start, let's look at today's learning objectives. After completing this session, you will be able to understand what form validation is, differentiate between client-side and server-side validation, apply validation rules in React applications, display user-friendly validation messages, prevent invalid data from being submitted, improve the quality and reliability of web applications. These are practical skills that every React developer uses while building real-world applications such as banking systems, e-commerce websites, hospital portals, and online registration systems. Why do we need form validation? Let's begin with a simple scenario. Imagine you are developing an online student registration portal. The registration form asks the students to enter name, email, mobile number, password, and age. Now, suppose a student enters the following, that is, name as blank, email without at symbol, and phone number with 5 digits, and password with a weak password. Should the system accept this information? Definitely not. Incorrect information creates several problems. For example, the college cannot contact the student because the email address is invalid. The password becomes weak and insecure. The mobile number is incomplete. Reports generated from the database becomes inaccurate. Therefore, before accepting any information, the application must check whether every input satisfies certain conditions. This checking process is known as form validation. Look at the validation workflow shown in the slide. The process is very simple. The user first enters the information into the form. The application validates the information. If an error is found, the application immediately displays an error message. If no error exists, the application allows the form to be submitted successfully. This simple workflow is followed by almost every modern website. Let's take a real-time example. Whenever you create an account on Gmail, the application immediately checks whether the email format is correct, the password is strong, the username is available. Similarly, while booking on train tickets, the website checks whether your age, mobile number, and Aadhaar number follows the required format. All these checks are examples of form validation. Now, what is form validation? Let's formally define the term. Form validation is the process of checking whether the information entered by the user is correct before the form is submitted. The main purpose is to ensure that only valid and meaningful data reaches the application. There are several important reasons why validation is necessary. It prevents the invalid data. Without validation, users can submit anything. Once information enters the database, it becomes difficult to maintain data quality. It improves the data quality. Validation ensures that every record stored in the database follows the required format. This improves the accuracy of reports and analytics. Enhance user experience. Instead of waiting until after submission, users receive immediate feedback so that the user corrects the mistake immediately. Reduce server errors. If incorrect information reaches the server has to reject it. This wastes the processing time. By validating on the client side first, many unnecessary requests are avoided. Let's look into a simple example. The correct email is abc@gmail.com. The incorrect email is abc@gmail.com. Why is the second email is invalid? Because it does not contain the @ symbol and a valid domain. Even this simple check prevents thousands of incorrect registrations every day. Types of validation. Now let's discuss the two major types of validation. Client-side validation, server-side validation. Client-side validation happens inside the user's browser before the data is sent to the server. React performs this type of validation because everything happens locally. The response is extremely fast. Examples include required fields, password length, email format, phone number length, confirm password matching. Suppose you forget to enter your name. As soon as you click submit, React immediately displays name is required. The browser does not even contact the server. This saves time and bandwidth. The advantages of client-side validation includes faster response, better user experience, reduced server load, and immediate feedback. Type 2 server-side validation. Now suppose you enter the username as student123. The browser thinks this username is valid. But what if another student has already registered using the same username? Only the server knows that the server checks its database. If the user already exists, it returns an error. Some examples include username already exists, email already registered, duplicate roll number, database constraints, invalid login credentials. Actually, why do we need both? Many beginners think client-side validation alone is enough. It is not. Client-side validation improves user experience. Server-side validation ensures security and correctness. For example, even if a malicious user disables JavaScript in the browser, the server still validates every request. Therefore, professional applications always use both client-side and server-side validation. Common validation rules. Now let's look at some commonly used validation rules. Every field in a form usually has its own rule. A name cannot be empty, Email must follow a valid email format. Password, it should have minimum 8 characters. Phone number, exactly 10 digits. Age should be greater than 18 years. Whenever users enter the information, React checks these rules before allowing the form to be submitted. These rules ensure that the collected data is complete, accurate, and meaningful. Now we understand what form validation is, why it is important, and different types of validation. And the next question is, how do we actually implement validation in a React application? Controlled form validation. Now let us learn how validation is actually implemented in a React application. As we studied in the previous slides, React mainly uses controlled forms for validation. But why? Because React always knows the current value entered by the user. Whenever the user types something into the input field, React immediately stores that value inside its state using the useState hook. Now let's understand the code shown on the slide. With the first line const, initially it contains an empty string because the user has not entered any value. The function setEmail is used to update the value whenever the user types. Think of it as a notebook. Whenever the user types a letter, React immediately writes it into the notebook. Connect the input field. This is where the input field becomes a controlled component. Now let's understand the two important attributes, value equal to email. This tells React display whatever value is stored inside the email state instead of the browser controlling the text box. React controls it. OnChange event. Whenever the user types, the OnChange event is triggered. The latest value entered by the user is available in e.target.value. React immediately stores this value using setEmail. This process repeats for every key press. Let's say the user types. The sequence is user types, React captures the input, state variable updates, React re-renders the component, the updated value appears on the screen. This happens in milliseconds and gives the impression that the text box is updating instantly. Next, it performs the validation. Once the value is stored in state, we can validate it. It simply checks whether the email field is empty. If it is empty, React immediately displays email required. The form is not submitted until the user enters a valid email address. Handling validation errors. Suppose a registration form contains 5 fields: name, email, password, phone number, age. What if more than one field is incorrect? Should we display only one error? No. A professional application displays all validation errors together. To achieve this, React stores all error messages inside another state variable called errors. Creating an error state. Notice that we are using an object because every field can have its own error message. Each property stores the error corresponding to that field. Suppose the user leaves the name field as empty, this stores the error message inside the object. If the name is empty, React automatically displays name is required directly below the input field. Once the user enters the valid name, the error disappears automatically. Let's take a simple example. Imagine a college admission portal. The student clicks submit without entering any information. Instead of displaying only one error, the application immediately shows name is required, email is required, phone number is required, password is required. This makes it much easier for users to correct all mistakes at once. Now let's move to one of the most common validation tasks, email validation. Simply checking whether the field is empty is not enough. The email must also follow a proper format. For example, these are valid email addresses. The first two, student at gmail.com, abc at yahoo.com. But the remaining are invalid. How do we check this? React uses something called a regular expression, often called regex. A regular expression is simply a pattern used to check whether a string follows a required format. Think of it as a template. If the input matches the template, it is accepted. Otherwise, it is rejected. The regex used in the slide const regex. This pattern checks whether the email contains some characters before at, the at symbol, some characters after at, a dot, and a valid domain name. If it does not match, React displays invalid email address. If the email satisfies the pattern, the error message disappears automatically. This immediate feedback improves the overall user experience. Where do we use email validation? Email validation is used in almost every web application: Gmail account creation, online banking, Amazon registration, Flipkart login, college admission portals, hospital management systems, online job applications. Without email validation, users may enter incorrect email addresses and important notifications would never reach them. So far, we have learned how to validate required fields and email addresses. Now, let's discuss another important validation, password validation. Whenever we create an account on websites like Gmail, Amazon, Facebook, or internet banking, we are asked to create a strong password. Why? Because passwords protect our personal information. If we use weak passwords, they can be guessed very easily. To improve security, applications follow password validation rules. Most websites require the password to satisfy these conditions: minimum 8 characters, at least one uppercase letter, at least one lowercase letter, at least one number, and at least one special characters. Let's look into the examples. The password 1235 is weak and the password react at 123 is strong. So this satisfies almost all common password rules. Now let's understand the complete process of submitting a validated form. The slide shows a simple workflow followed by almost every React application. First step, the user fills the form. Step 2, user clicks the submit button. Step 3, validation begins. Step 4, any errors. Step 5, validation successful. Finally, the server stores the information in the database. The user enters the data, the React validates the data. If there are any errors, it shows the errors. If there are no errors, submit the form. It stores the data in database. So these are the some best practices So what are all the validations it should consider before submit? It shows the clear error messages, validate while typing, highlighting the invalid fields. It uses reusable validation functions. It uses React hook form or Formic for large projects. So let's quickly revise today's lecture. Today we learned what form validation is, why validation is important, client-side and server-side validation, common validation rules, controlled form validation using React State, displaying the validation errors, email validation using regular expressions, password validation techniques, form submission workflow, and the best practices followed in professional React applications. Before we end today's session, remember this important point. Creating a form is only the first step. Ensuring that the information entered is accurate, complete, and secure is what makes an application reliable and user friendly. Whether you are building a simple contact form or a large scale banking application, proper validation is essential for maintaining data quality, enhancing security, and providing a better user experience. Thank you for watching this lecture. See you in the next lecture. Happy learning.